Hi, welcome to Market Wrap number 141. Stuart Williamson here at the helm. This week we're looking at residential markets to see what we can find that's useful or helpful for our clients or potential property investors to listen to, learn about, and potentially help them buy. Please do subscribe if you can, share, have listened to our podcasts. The sagacious Paul Shearer, fantastic guy. This week, some good news, some bad news with buy-to-let landlords selling up, some good news from Rightmove, and some strange news from 60-year-olds who are still living at home. So what is the good news? Firstly, a string of economic data published this week has revealed that the Western economies are holding up far better than expected, renewing fears that central banks will act more robustly to stamp out inflation. US stocks on the back of this had their worst day for 2 months. What was the report? The S&P Global Purchasing Managers Index report from the US, the UK and Eurozone. They all came in, and they all came in above economists' expectations for February. There were signs of inflationary pressures easing across all three. But what it means is that this information will mean that the central banks could well keep interest rates higher for longer to stamp out, to get rid of any chance of inflation returning. So it's good news, but it's good news. Commentators have suggested that the Fed, in particular, is frightened to death of repeating the 1980 decision of Paul Volcker, who was the head at that time, who famously blinked in the face of rising unemployment, and inflation remained therefore at 12% throughout the end of 1980 and only returned to 3% 3 years later. And that was only after a brutal period of hikes that saw the Fed rate almost at 20%. 20%, can you believe that? So how has the UK consumer played its part in all this? Well, the US release was largely representing a stabilisation of the private sector activity. The UK and Eurozone actually bounced back, so it didn't stabilise, it did better. Both the manufacturing and service sectors achieved a return to growth in the UK, reversing 6 months of falling output. Survey respondents cited rising customer demand and improving business confidence due to people being less worried about the economy, fewer supply shortages, and falling inflation. But it's not just businesses either. Stronger than expected retail sales figures for January suggested that consumer confidence is more than holding up. And this has led to a rebound in the general view that the trajectory of house prices has gone down and it's actually short-lived and is coming back up, if you look at the chart here. Regardless, financial markets now point to a 95% increase in the Bank of England base rate, moving up in March as opposed to 90% earlier in the week. But we all knew that anyway, didn't we? You know, it was bound to go up. In the meantime, mortgage rates are still ticking downwards. Okay, HSBC is the latest bank to cut all its rates as of yesterday, which is fantastic. Okay, so that's positive. That's the good news. Now what's the bad news is buy-to-let landlords are selling up. Now, according to this particular piece of not very good reporting, a third of buy-to-let landlords expect to sell some of their properties next year. So it's not a third, it's some of the properties of a third. And this is according to the National Residential Landlord Association sharing data with the Times. So it appears on the surface to be bad, a third are selling, oh my God, what an end of the world and I. But in reality, it's not happening. And if it was a third, it'd be the worst divestment for over 6 years. And they say that the prospect of further reform, particularly the EPC requirements for rental properties, as you know from 2025, 2028, grade C or above where you can't rent out, will be a challenge for some landlords. Separate data from the English Private Landlord Survey suggests that changes to legislation are the most common reason why people pull out. I understand that. But it will lead to more shortages of rental stock, which will mean that rents will rise for those landlords staying in the sector. And the case for investing, therefore, in things like build to rent is actually strengthening because there's a better market for it. It's a very small part, build to rent. If you don't know what build to rent is, it's properties that are actually built and owned by big corporations that are just for renting, not privately owned. But it's still a relatively small proportion of the market, as this lovely chart shows. Now, what's next? Good news. Why the property crash may not be as bad as initially thought. Alamar. I know, I always get slated for this. rose-tinted glasses, all that sort of stuff, but I'm a positive person. Okay, asking prices for homes for sale have risen by just £14 in the last month, the smallest increase on record for this time of year. The property website Rightmove found the average price of properties coming to the market this month was just £14 up, equal to 0%, the smallest ever increase from January to February. Prices remaining flat rather than falling could be seen by a positive person as a positive and a positive sign for the year ahead. The website said, suggesting that sellers are heeding their agents' advice and being more realistic on price. The annual rate of growth for the UK has slowed to 3.9% in the 12 months to February, down by 6.3% in January. Despite the turbulent economic conditions, buyer demand is rising, according to Rightmove. They go on to say the number of people contacting estate agents has risen by 11% in the last 2 weeks compared to the same period in 2019. Use 2019 as an example because it's pre-COVID. The number of sales agreed has also rebounded, the data found, with figures for the beginning of the year now only 11% down on the same period in 2019. This compares to 15% down in January, December, and 30% down for November, October after the Trussite mini budget. So improving market conditions have been supported by, as we've said, mortgage rates falling. You can get some good rates out there. Well, I heard of one this week, 3.99% for a 5-year fix in the UK, which means that 5% 5-year fix is not far away from us. They're quoting at the moment on Rightmove 15% deposit. We'll now be looking at an average rate of 4.8%, which is down by 1.1% from what it was in October. They go on to say on Rightmove, this reduction in mortgage rates may have played a role in recent increase in buyer demand. Well, that's obvious really, isn't it? Matt Thompson of Chesterton's, the estate agents, said it has seen a 17% increase in viewings and a 14% fall in withdrawals in the same period, suggesting fewer window shoppers, tyre kickers, horn tooters, whatever you want to call them. He added, for the remainder of February, as mortgage deals have already come down, we expect to see more buyers wanting to capitalise on favourable rates before we enter the spring market, which is expected to get more competitive. Why is it getting more competitive? Because people have got cold feet about buying recently, so there's a lot of pent-up demand. There's still a shortage of property compared to 2019, with available properties down by 24%, but it's way more than a year ago, I think, which was something like 48% less. So things are looking much better on availability. Sales agreed figures have also showed that first-time buyer sector is recovering better than the top end of the market, which is more discretionary. Now, why is that? I think probably because it's better to buy than it is to rent. If you're paying, rents in London have gone up by 16%, in Nottingham by 12, 11 in Manchester. So it's better to buy. Tim Bannister of Rightmove said that the combination of sellers being more realistic on price and an improving picture of the number of sales being agreed upon suggested a softer landing for the market than many expected. He also said homeowners who are coming to the market in the upcoming spring season should use their agents' expertise and get the price right in the first time to get the right buyer more quickly, i.e. don't be stupid and price it out of the market. Agents are reporting, he says, that there are now increasingly seeing buyers who have more confidence and more choice, albeit with revised budgets to accommodate the higher mortgage rates. First-time buyers are being priced out though because they can't afford the mortgages, even if they need to get out of it. And I think that means they're going to have to be looking at cheaper property, spending a bit more time renting to get a higher deposit, and then have to factor in those higher monthly payments. So that's a pretty grim situation. But it does reflect what we're seeing is that city centres, studios, one beds, those sort of things are really moving out quickly. Now, 1 in 3 over 65s are still relying on the bank of mum and dad. Now, I have kids and I am the bank of mum and dad, and I understand that. And traditionally, it's been associated with helping youngsters, the bank of mum and dad, to get people on a property ladder, which is what I'm all about. But now even middle-aged baby boomers are relying on their elderly parents for financial support. Close to a third of those aged 65 and above are relying on inheritances from their parents to help fund their retirements or pay off their mortgages. This is according to analysis by the property website Zoopla. Crazy. The figure rises to 37% amongst those aged 55 to 64, which compares to 44% of those aged 25 to 34 and 43% of those aged 35 to 44. Okay, the survey wasn't great, it was only 2,000 people, but it's still extraordinary. It's an indication of the situation that we are in the UK, with the cost of living going up so quickly. Also, you're seeing a lot of people have left the workforce thinking, well, I'm not going to bother. And that's, mean they're looking for other people for funding. The website goes to say, when you think of parental property inheritance, you might picture millennials using the money to get their foot on the ladder. But in reality, people of all ages are depending on those funds now. As average life expectancy increases and the retirement age creeps upwards, it's logical to assume that inheritance is taking longer than ever to reach beneficiaries, who may in fact be approaching retirement themselves. That's true. So there we go. That's a fun fact. Well, it's not fun, really, is it? So there we go. That's what we're all about this week at APW. Please do like, subscribe if you can, and enjoy it. If you do get an opportunity, please listen to the sagacious Paul Shearer on our podcast. He's a great guy. He's got some really interesting interviews with lots of different industry pundits. If you get a chance, come and visit us at our networking evening on the 9th of March in Singapore, or in Dubai on the 14th of March. Thank you very much for watching. Do take care. All the best. Cheers.